In the depths of the ocean, where the water is as blue as the clearest sky, there swam a mermaid with dreams bigger than the sea itself. Ariel, the youngest daughter of King Triton, longed to be part of the human world. Enter Ursula, the sea witch, often vilified for her role in Ariel's tale. But was she truly the villain of the story? Or just a business-savvy octopus upholding a contract? Let's dive into a fun exploration of why Ursula might not have been as bad as we think. First and foremost, what we all need to remember in this story is that it was Ariel who approached Ursula and asked for a way to acquire human legs so that she could pursue the human she had fallen in love with. Not the other way around. Ariel wasn't tricked. She knew exactly what she was doing. Ursula and Ariel entered into a legally binding agreement. Ursula offered Ariel a chance to become human, and in exchange, Ariel agreed to give up her voice. The terms were as clear as the ocean. The contract was signed, and let's be honest, Ariel wasn't exactly coerced into signing. She had a dream, and Ursula provided a solution, albeit with a few tentacles attached. But in the end, we all know how the story ends. Ariel gets everything she wanted, and Ursula ends up dead. But was her fate really deserved? After all, she was just a businesswoman who ran her underwater dealings like a true entrepreneur, and she got screwed on a contract. She is portrayed as a villain, but from the very start, the lady was just running her hustle. She saw a demand for transformational services and supplied them. Sure, her methods were a bit unorthodox, but in the grand scheme of the ocean, she was just another creature trying to make a wave. If you take a moment to analyze her character, you will find that Ursula was the epitome of an upstanding and honest merperson. In the murky waters of contract law, transparency is key, and Ursula, the sea witch, could teach a masterclass. She didn't just whisper the terms to Ariel in the dark corners of her lair, she performed an entire musical number. Poor Unfortunate Souls wasn't just a catchy tune, it was a full-blown disclosure of the contract's terms and the consequences of not fulfilling them. In one part of the song, she sings, "It has happened once or twice that someone couldn't pay the price, and I'm afraid I had to rake them across the coals." With every verse and chorus of her song, Ursula laid out the stark realities of the deal. She highlighted the plight of those who had come before Ariel, ensuring the Little Mermaid understood exactly what she was getting into. It was a performance that combined the flair of Broadway with the fine print of a legal document. The song served as a cautionary tale, a warning wrapped in melody, making it clear that failure to comply with the contract would result in Ariel joining the ranks of the poor, unfortunate souls. Ursula's approach was nothing if not thorough, ensuring that Ariel could never claim ignorance of the pact she made. If we are being perfectly honest, we need to recognize that Ursula's commitment to clarity in her contractual dealings was commendable. So, can a person who goes above and beyond to help the person she is dealing with understand the contract she is signing be fairly called a villain? The consensus here at Listworthy is a resounding no. Perhaps Ursula's desire to control the seas wasn't purely power-hungry. Maybe she was tired of Triton's rule and believed she could offer a better leadership style. After all, a kingdom where contracts are respected and upheld doesn't sound too shabby, does it? Ursula's ambition to rise above her station and challenge the status quo could be seen as a bold move in a world dominated by Triton's iron trident. She wasn't just a villain. She was a disruptor, a challenger to the throne who dared to dream of a different kind of underwater order. It's also worth noting that Ariel, despite her innocence and charm, did fail to uphold her end of the bargain. She knew the stakes, she knew the deadline, and yet she couldn't seal the deal with a kiss. Ursula was merely enforcing the agreement, as any good business entity would. Ariel's failure to meet the terms of the contract wasn't Ursula's fault. It was a classic case of buyer's remorse. Ariel wanted the dream, but wasn't fully prepared to face the consequences of her choices. It is also worth noting that in the original Little Mermaid tale by Hans Christian Andersen, the sea witch the Little Mermaid makes a deal with isn't portrayed as a villain. In fact, the Little Mermaid's sisters cut a new deal with the sea witch in order to save her. This further underscores the idea that Ursula's role in the story is more nuanced than the Disney adaptation suggests. She wasn't inherently evil. She was simply a facilitator of deals, a neutral party in the grand scheme of things. In conclusion, while Ursula's methods may have been questionable, her adherence to the contract was impeccable. She may have been a sea witch, but she was also a creature of her word. So next time you watch The Little Mermaid, maybe give Ursula a break. After all, in the world of magical contracts and underwater deals, she was just following the fine print. And there you have it. A lighthearted look at Ursula's side of the story. Whether you see her as a villain or a misunderstood businesswoman, one thing is certain. She made a splash in the world of Disney villains, and her legacy will continue to swim through the tides of time. So next time you find yourself humming "Poor Unfortunate Souls," remember it's not just a song. It's a lesson in the importance of understanding the fine print. Ursula may have been a sea witch, but she was also a reminder that every deal comes with its own set of tentacles. And sometimes the real villain isn't the one enforcing the contract. It's the one who fails to read it. In Disney tales, there is often a double standard to villainy. For example, why is Ursula vilified for enforcing a contract, while characters like King Triton are celebrated for their authoritarian rule? Triton's overbearing parenting and refusal to listen to Ariel's desires are just as problematic as Ursula's deal-making. Yet, Triton is portrayed as a loving father, while Ursula is labeled a monster. This double standard raises questions about who gets to decide what's good and evil in the underwater kingdom. Ursula's so-called villainy is rooted in her refusal to conform to the expectations placed on her by Triton's regime. She's a rebel, a disruptor, and a challenger to the status quo. In many ways, her character is a critique of the power structures that dominate the ocean, and by extension, our own world. Ursula's services, while controversial, fulfill a genuine need in the underwater world. She offers transformation to those who feel out of place in their current forms, whether it's mermaids wanting to become human or other sea creatures seeking change. In a way, she's providing a service that no one else is willing to offer. Her business is built on the idea that everyone deserves a chance to pursue their dreams, even if the cost is high. This raises an interesting ethical question. Is it wrong to provide a service that people willingly seek out, even if it comes with risks? Ursula doesn't force anyone to make a deal with her. Her clients come to her of their own free will. In that sense, she's more of a neutral figure than a villain. Let's not overlook the fact that Ursula is one of the most entertaining characters in Disney's roster. Her theatrical personality, larger-than-life presence, and iconic song, "Poor Unfortunate Souls," make her a fan favorite. Her flair for the dramatic isn't just for show. It's a strategic move to ensure her clients fully understand the gravity of the deals they're making. She's a performer, a negotiator, and a master of persuasion, all rolled into one. Her charisma and confidence are qualities often lacking in traditional Disney heroines. While Ariel is wide-eyed and innocent, Ursula is bold, cunning, and unafraid to speak her mind. In a way, she's a role model for anyone who's ever felt underestimated or overlooked. Ursula's death at the end of The Little Mermaid is often seen as a triumphant moment, but it's worth considering the tragedy of her demise. She was a businesswoman who played by the rules, only to be betrayed by a client who couldn't uphold her end of the bargain. Now let's tackle the case for sabotage. There's a compelling argument to be made that Ursula didn't exactly play fair and sabotaged Ariel's chance of success. While she was upfront about the terms of the contract, she may have stacked the deck against Ariel in subtle ways. Here's how. 1. The voice dilemma. Ursula took Ariel's voice, which was her most valuable asset in winning Prince Eric's heart. Without it, Ariel was left to rely solely on her physical appearance and body language to communicate. This put her at a significant disadvantage, especially since Eric had already fallen in love with her voice when she saved him from the shipwreck. By removing Ariel's voice, Ursula effectively crippled her chances of success. 2. The 3-day deadline. Ursula gave Ariel an impossibly short window of 3 days to make Eric fall in love with her. This tight deadline added immense pressure and left little room for error. It's almost as if Ursula wanted Ariel to fail, ensuring she could claim her soul and add her to the collection of poor, unfortunate souls. 3. Flotsam and Jetsam's interference. Ursula's eel minions, Flotsam and Jetsam, actively worked against Ariel by sabotaging her efforts to connect with Eric. They caused chaos during Ariel's date with Eric, nearly capsizing their boat and creating a distraction that prevented Ariel from getting closer to him. This direct interference suggests that Ursula wasn't just a neutral party. She was actively working to ensure Ariel's failure. 4. The seduction spell. In the climax of the film, Ursula uses Ariel's voice to enchant Eric and nearly succeeds in marrying him herself. This move reveals her true intentions. She never wanted Ariel to succeed. Her goal was always to claim Ariel's soul and use her as a pawn to overthrow King Triton. On the other hand, one could argue that Ursula didn't sabotage Ariel. Ariel simply underestimated the challenges of her new life. Here's why. 1. Ariel's naivety. Ariel was so consumed by her infatuation with Eric and the human world that she didn't fully consider the consequences of her actions. She was willing to give up her voice, her family, and her entire life under the sea for a chance at love. This impulsive decision-making suggests that Ariel was unprepared for the realities of her new life, regardless of Ursula's involvement. 2. The contract was clear. Ursula laid out the terms of the deal in no uncertain terms. She even sang an entire song, Poor Unfortunate Souls, to explain the risks and consequences. Ariel knew what she was getting into and chose to proceed anyway. If anything, Ursula was transparent about the stakes. 3. Ariel's failure to adapt. Once on land, Ariel struggled to adapt to her new circumstances. She relied heavily on others, like Sebastian and Scuttle, to help her navigate the human world, and she failed to find alternative ways to communicate with Eric. While Ursula's terms were harsh, Ariel's inability to think creatively or strategically contributed to her downfall. 4. Eric's free will. Ultimately, Eric's feelings were his own. Even if Ursula hadn't interfered, there was no guarantee that Eric would have fallen in love with Ariel within 3 days. Love is unpredictable, and Ariel's plan relied on a lot of assumptions. Ursula's interference may have sped up the process, but it didn't necessarily change the outcome. One might wonder, was Ursula playing both sides? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Ursula may not have outright sabotaged Ariel, but she certainly didn't make it easy for her. By setting strict terms and creating obstacles, Ursula ensured that Ariel's success was unlikely, but not impossible. This way, Ursula could maintain the appearance of fairness while still stacking the odds in her favor. In this interpretation, Ursula is less of a villain and more of a shrewd negotiator. She gave Ariel a chance, but she also made sure that the deck was stacked in her own favor. It's a classic case of the house always wins. So, did Ursula sabotage Ariel's chance at success? The answer depends on how you view the situation. If you believe Ursula actively undermined Ariel through her terms, minions, and manipulations, then yes, she sabotaged her. But if you see Ariel as a willing participant who failed to meet the challenges of her new life, then Ursula's role becomes more ambiguous. Ultimately, The Little Mermaid is a story about choices and consequences. Ariel chose to make a deal with Ursula, knowing the risks involved. Ursula, for her part, provided a service with clear terms, albeit ones that were heavily skewed in her favor. Whether you see Ursula as a saboteur or a savvy businesswoman, one thing is clear. She played the game better than anyone else in the ocean. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. In a world where deals come with fine print, it's up to you to read between the lines, or risk becoming another poor, unfortunate soul.